Hello, Neal, Beijing. So I've got the enviable job of standing between you guys and lunch, so I'll try and go as quick as possible and make sure we get you guys well fed. So this morning I'm going to talk to you about dynamic network services. Most service providers are still doing fixed line static network services, and BT are transitioning to deliver dynamic network services, and we'll talk a little bit about that. I'm not going to go down in the weeds. I see a lot of you have had a lot of technology insights today. What I'd like to talk to you guys about is the operational aspect you should think about when you're engaging your customers, because it is a major transition not only for the service provider but also for the customer. So let's go through them. So customers, they're going through a digital transformation, and a lot of the digital transformation, as been discussed this morning, is being driven by cloud adoption, being driven by IoT adoption, and most importantly for the vendors is technology refresh cycles. And they're looking to hybrid networks to be able to drive cost optimization within their business, but while looking at cost optimization from access, they're also looking at what new technologies they need to invest in to enable them to progress their digital transformation technology. So there's primary aspects that they're looking at, the major drivers behind that. They are in effect looking at the design influences that impact the decisions. What do you look at? Performance and agility, primary security, very key aspect with dynamic network services, the ability to scale, and especially when you look at multinational networks, it's really key that you have a partner that can help you scale, take that software-defined solution from the lab to the field and scale over multiple countries. And then the main driver for a lot of the customers is the cost optimization. So let's step through these stages. So from a performance and agility perspective, the key driver that I find when I meet with my customers is, do they have visibility of the applications that they are running within their network? And often enough, they stick to the main core applications, Microsoft Office, Skype for Business solutions, looking at Salesforce.com as an example. But then beyond that, they don't have any visibility of the other applications running within their business. So that is one of the key decision criteria when we start to map out how you take a customer down that transformation journey, is identifying what these applications are. Because the applications in the data center can be very different to the applications at the edge of the business. And when you're defining policy around your software-defined networks, is how do you define policy to meet the application requirements to make sure business-critical applications have access priority over non-business critical applications. And it gets even more complex from there. When you start to get into the lines of business, HR might have a higher priority over someone in finance. So how do you justify to the HR manager versus the CFO who gets priority of traffic? So it's really key to sit down with your customers, understand the applications they're running, understand the business criticality, and then that allows you to design a network for performance and agility. Security. This is a very key aspect. The amount of customers I talk to that are willing to just transform, pull out the MPLS, go straight to a hybrid network solution, but nobody's considered the security aspect of it. So, one of the other key criteria when we're looking at security is we do a lot of asset discovery for the customers. Go into a business, understand what assets they are hanging off their network. Because a lot of the time, most businesses do not have line of sight of all the assets that they have within the business. And as we go down to an industry of IoT, when more and more of these assets are going to become connected to the internet from the edge of the business, from the data center, it's important that the business defines and designs a security aspect to be able to service those assets. The other component around the asset discovery is also working with the customer to identify where those assets are in their technology refresh cycles. So how do you look at the mean time to failure versus the mean time to break of an asset, and look at the impact and risk to the business of that asset going down versus another, and creating a timeline of shift. And this also takes that shift going from traditional silicon appliances to network functions, and giving them that transformation model with the customer. These are very key aspects when working with the customer and impact the security, because as more of these appliances, as I mentioned, attach to the network and attach to the cloud, you open up the attack vector within the business for people to come into the organization, because you've got more access methods to that organization. So how do you reduce the blast radius? That's another key consideration. And then scale. This is one of my favorite subjects. Often I work within multinational companies across multiple regions, and the challenge a lot of customers have is how do they scale up their solution across multiple countries, and how do they basically drive the deployment that's consistent. And it's really about getting consistent user experience and customer experience. And this is, once again, comes into where we have that application discovery. How do you delve down and identify how the applications are being used, and making sure that you're driving the most optimal experience for the users? Because if you don't have the users using the technology, or your customers using the technology, you're not getting a return on investment. So it's a really key consideration to make sure you've got consistent experience across multi-regions. And then cost optimization, customer's favorite. I don't want to pay anything for it, but I want the most amazing experience. So it is a balance between a scalable network, a agile network, but also balancing security. So it's a very fine balancing act, and working with the customer in an advisory mode, you get to better understand where they're trying to go, and you can basically design a network specific for that customer. And going back to looking at your maintenance windows, doing preventative maintenance with the customers really helps drive a lot of cost optimization. The application discovery, once again, if users are not using those applications, why are you paying for them within the business? So you can also get a transfer of wallet from software that's not being utilized towards other areas within the business, and build your business case to help that customer move along. So this is where BT is at play. I'm not going to give a plug-in to the organization, but one of the key things that we help organizations do is have a ability to look at the cost benefits of their services across multiple regions, but also at the same time provide a transparent platform where they can see the benchmarking we have against other providers with these global networks. And what we bring to the table, especially when you get to SDN and NFV, is the managed services. A lot of organizations still are testing this in the lab. They do not know how to take it into production. And so this is where the managed services capability comes in. How do we bring the expertise to the company to help them scale up their services? In addition, we also have cloud services integration. How do we help the companies open up their business to cloud providers and be able to define SLAs and make sure we get good access to the different cloud providers out in the regions that we operate? And then one of the other key criteria is that network services integration. How do we work with the customers to consolidate the amount of suppliers they have? That's a major cost impact to a lot of businesses. How do we work with them to negotiate better contracts with their vendors? And this is what BT bring to the table for a lot of organizations. Combining all of these helps pull together all those different aspects and objectives that organizations are looking for when trying to achieve transformation. So what are we doing in the dynamic network services space, spoken about from a customer aspect? A lot of our customers are looking for the ability to have flexible bandwidth capability, to be able to go in and basically provision bandwidth through a portal and ramp it up and down based on seasonality or testing requirements, but also be able to use it as a utility, pay for it as you use it, bring it back down. And so this is part of the dynamic network services solutions that we're bringing into the market, is our ability to scale bandwidth on demand. In addition, we're also bringing in virtual services on demand. How do we allow customers to be able to provision services that are NFV orientated and be able to spin them up and spin them down based on testing, workloads, etc., and pay for them as they need them? This is a key criteria for a lot of DevOps environments where they don't want to have a continuous contract. They just want to pay for the usage and be able to leverage the services as they need them. And so this is being made available through the same portal to allow customers to self-service and manage it themselves, and puts a bit more power back into the customer's hands. So programmable networks, they change and improve the agility for service providers. Instead of taking months and often years for large-scale deployments to basically configure traditional silicone with command line interface, we can now create policy and provision these services a lot quicker. This drives down the cost aspect, but also allows us to offer customers options when they're looking at what they need to deliver in the services that they're looking for. They can still run a traditional tin environment, but they can also move towards the agile CPE or the virtual services on demand. And they can mix and match them as they transition through their life cycle, get the return on investment, and manage their total cost of ownership through this transition. So this is a key consideration of being able to offer choice to our customers. And in addition, being able to come into an organization and map that out with them is really key, because customers' experience is key. And basically third-party interface is another key. As we introduce more ecosystems, more APIs come into the mix, there's a key consideration of how you bring that in and allow the customer to choose their own network functions, not only the functions that are sitting with the initial offer, but also introduce and open up new network functions from other vendors. So the first solution we launched in 2016 was our Cisco IWAN solution. We've been in the market with this for over a year now, and we're also releasing other vendors around the SD-WAN. SD-WAN is very nascent still. It's very interesting, having worked with many customers. Most organizations are still in that proof of concept cycle, testing out, making sure these solutions work for them, choosing the vendor, which vendor they're going to work with, who they're going to put their money down with. And what I've found is this has stalled a lot of sales cycles, because organizations are trying to make the right decision and the right future investments. And as a result, these customers are looking for service validation. So as we jump along, there's an interesting study from IHS which shows the market results for SD-WAN globally. And as you can see, for the respective vendors, just in the first quarter of 2017, Viptela is got a market share of $7.7 million in the first quarter, and they've got 21% market share. And as you go down the list, you see the total market in Q1 was $36 million. Is this something to be concerned about, guys? Absolutely not. This market is nascent. People are testing it out, working out where they're going. SDX Central has released a study around network functions virtualization, and I predict the market to be a $105 billion market by 2020. So there's a massive upside for service providers and for vendors in the space. And it's up to us to help customers drive awareness of these solutions and also take that advisory role on. We need to collectively as an industry help them understand where this is going and help them get there. So what is holding back the market? We go through the industrial revolutions that we've been through. We're now in the fourth industrial revolution, and the degree of complexity has increased, and this has created the challenges for service providers and vendors, because customers, the usage and adoption cycles are a lot more difficult because of that level of complexity. So, through the facilitation of proof of concepts, that's one great method to test out these solutions in the lab. But, one of the other key components is the facilitation of business model transformation. This is a challenge. Most of you are probably going, why would you look at a business model transformation? So as we jump through to the next slide, you'll see network functions virtualization impacts organizations across multiple lines of business. It is absolutely key. This is a framework from TM Forum that identifies the various impacts to the different lines of business. So as you think about it, as you're going down a network functions virtualization from an HR perspective, you need to have staff on hand that can actually do programmable capability. The old school line of command line interfaces are no longer needed. You need to hire staff with Python capability as an example. You look at when you go into the procurement departments, they're no longer procuring tin and having to manage budgets for the next refresh cycle that 3 to 5 years down the line. They need to basically set up their systems so that they can purchase these services on demand from cloud providers and be able to manage that within the environment. And that has major implications for the security department. How do the security department define security policies to enable organizations to go through the transformation and meet the requirements of their lines of business, but also their customers? So these are some of the key considerations. And then also, across multinational borders, there's a legal consideration. What services can you download? Which services can you not download? What is the impact? What's the data sovereignty issue? So there's a lot of considerations. And this is a key aspect for a lot of companies. They are looking at how they change their business model to be able to go into the next phase of their digital transformation. one of the key challenges is, the ITIL management practices, being able to bring these expertise into businesses and help them define governance and set up a structure around the different lines of business to make sure that they're meeting the best practices for their organizations. And this is where service providers, we have these practices, we've been investing in these practices, how we can bring these in as a managed service and help these organizations transform. It's a major investment for a lot of companies to be able to go down the path of getting ITIL certification along many aspects within the business. And as you can see, it covers quite a few lines of business in multiple areas. So how do you set structure? How do you set goals? How do you work with the customers to define a roadmap? And then most importantly, overlay that with governance. These are all key criteria that most organizations are looking at. It sits at the board level. They're looking at what their SDNFV strategy is going to be, how that impacts their digital transformation, how their network transformation is going to underpin their digital transformation, because most organizations are in a disruptive mode at the moment, and it's about how do they survive. And this is a key consideration for the industry to understand how do we help our customers go through that transformation. And the role of the service provider is absolutely critical in the space. So I told you I'd be quick, wrapping you guys up for lunch. In closing out, guys, we're pretty much in the third wave of the Internet of Everything. The Steve Case book really is an interesting read, but one of the key takeaways that I took from this third wave is that the service providers are well placed on the core capabilities to facilitate network transformation. As an example, BT have invested in its people, it's invested in its products, it's invested in its platforms, it's invested in its partnerships, and it's invested in its policy frameworks. And effectively, we have persevered in this space for many years through the various technologies. So I'm going to wrap up the presentation today with saying there's loads of upside, lots of opportunity, and I'm very excited to be participating in this space. Thank you.